Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show on this Tuesday. So pleased to welcome back Victor Davis Hanson, professor at the Hoover Institution, professor at Hillsdale. He is also the host of the Victor Davis Hanson podcast, which Jack Fowler helps him out with. He's got his own website, victorhanson.com, which I recommend to you. How are you, Victor?
Pretty good, Liu. Pretty good. Glad to be
I'm
here.
glad to hear that. I want to talk to you about President Trump's 6 months in office, and I'm going to run down my list of issues from top to bottom. But before that, I wanted to ask you an off the wall question I can only ask a classicist and a historian. If you have to stack up Gaius Marius, Sulla, Pompey, Julius Caesar against each other, how do you rank them as the most significant for Rome?
Well, I think Julius Caesar was very different because not only did he didn't end the republic, but he announced that it was over, and after that we led to the Prince of it. But more importantly, he was a populist, so he was one of these strange people of the upper classes, but his appeal was to the middle and middling class. Unlike Sulla or Pompey, he was a Marian, great nephew of Marius, but generally he was kind of a Napoleonic figure. Whatever you think, he caused a lot of death and destruction, but he did change the calendar, and he changed the Republican emphasis on birth, age in the Senate, aristocracy, and he brought in a lot of new people, which his grandnephew Augustus then finished with the Augustan Revolution. So there was a revolution. We don't really appreciate it, but there was a revolution of new people into the Roman hierarchy. And it was never quite the same after Caesar, just like it wasn't in the French culture after Napoleon.
That's why I brought up Caesar and why I was going to move to Napoleon. I veer away from the term greatness, but significance is neutral, right? Significance, Mao is significant, Stalin is significant. They're significantly evil, but they're evil. How do you rate Napoleon in terms of significance against, say, Caesar and Augustus Caesar?
Well, he caused, put it this way, he was fighting with like people. So he's blamed for causing over 6 million to 7 million deaths in the Napoleonic Wars. But he really got the idea of a nation in arms. He created the modern state that it was inclusive. He changed the law code like Caesar and Augustus did. So he was an agent of radical change, and that radical change entailed a lot of death and destruction. And although he lost the Napoleonic Wars, you could argue that he had changed the way Europeans fought. From now on, a European country would be a nation in arms. There would be not as many mercenaries. There would not be as many aristocratic cavalry. That was the same thing Caesar did with the 10th Legion, etc. And so they're kind of problematic figures because they caused so much chaos, but the result of it, if you was probably more good than bad. They liberalized and expanded the body franchise of the state, and that was important. They were
Yeah,
enemies of the old aristocratic order, is what I'm trying to say to you.
get it? I get. Dr. Arnn and I are just beginning the long read of Churchill's World War II history. The very first chapter of which is what happened from 1918 until the rise of Hitler. In it, Churchill argues that communism birthed fascism, fascism birthed Nazism, and this is Churchill's record of killing off Nazism. How does Churchill rank in terms of significance? He's democratically elected in a sort of way. It's not direct democracy. How do you rank him in significance vis-a-vis Napoleon and Caesar?
Well, I think he's a greater man because I think you could argue that from June 25th of 1940 until the next June 22nd of 1941, he was the only person that stopped fascism. And we had the rise of Japan and the abandoned colonial states in places like Indonesia and Vietnam, and especially China. All of Europe, all of the nations that we call the EU today, some 30 nations, were either under Nazi control, Nazis themselves are allied as neutrals, but really allied, like Spain and Portugal. And he was the only person there, and all the pressures were against him. Halifax, the British aristocracy, to make some deal via Mussolini or somebody. And he had confidence, as he said, he quoted the famous first Lord of the Admiralty about Napoleon when they asked him, "Will Napoleon invade England?" He said, "I don't know, but it won't be by sea." And Churchill said Hitler will not come in here by sea, and that was the only way he could get in. And so he stood alone until the Soviet Union flipped and had been an enemy of his, a de facto ally of Germany. Then suddenly it was an enemy of Germany. But nobody could have kept the Allied cause alive for an entire year by himself against such formidable enemies, except, I think, by sheer willpower, Churchill.
So, in terms of those three, Caesar and then Napoleon and then Churchill, can any American president actually be as significant because they cannot act independent of the Congress? They certainly can do things as the top of my list. Trump ordered the destruction of the nuclear program in Iran, which is a big deal, world changing, historically significant deal. But he still can't do things in the way that even FDR could do because there was a declaration of war. Can any American president be significant in the way that those wartime leaders and historical figures have been?
Well, we'll see, because Donald Trump is waging a classic counter-revolution. It's economic, social, cultural, military, diplomatic, political. I've never seen anybody try that. Reagan, maybe for the first year, tried it, and then he kind of went into the tax cuts, deregulation, the Cold War, but not this multifaceted fashion. Nobody thought you could take on the elite universities about surcharges on grants or endowment taxes or anti-Semitic. He's doing all of that. And no one thought you could take on the green lobby. The military told us we just can't get 55,000 extra recruits that we need anymore. It's drugs or gangs or we're in competition with private industry. He did. No, everybody said you cannot close the border without comprehensive immigration. That was proven to be a fallacy. But when you look at the breadth of what he's trying to do, and then you look within the Republican Party, he's really, I don't think historians appreciate that. He's taken race and tribe and replaced it with class interests. So the Republican Party now is saying to the Hispanic truck driver, the black truck driver, the white truck driver, you all have more in common than you do with your self-appointed leaders on TV or media or The View or in politics or Hakeem Jeffrey or any of these people. And so if you had said he's going to get 55% of the Hispanic male vote or 26% of the black male vote, everybody thought that would be impossible. And so he really, I think he's revolutionized the Republican Party in positive ways. And so he's done as much as you can do in our system, is what I'm trying to say, Hugh.
And so at the same time, it's my argument the Democratic Party could go the way of the Whigs. I really think Mr. Mamdani, or Comrade Mamdani as I call him, is their end point. That's where they're heading with an AOC-led, Mamdani-supported party. And that's not on my list of achievements for Trump's first 6 months. It's a byproduct of it. But do you think the Democrats might implode?
I thought they would. The only thing I can see is, when they looked at 68 and Humphrey lost by 100,000 votes, everybody said they're going to move to the center because Humphrey didn't distance himself from LBJ's Great Society. But they didn't. They dug down just like they're doing now after the Harris defeat. They went full McGovern. They wanted to cut the defense budget in half, guaranteed income, et cetera, et cetera. And they destroyed the party. And I think it was the fourth largest landslide in history in the 72 election. And then, they kind of hedged a little bit and said, we'll go back to the Southern accented, fake, moderate Jimmy Carter. That didn't quite work too well. But they did survive long enough for Bill Clinton, whether it was genuine or not, to go back to a JFK, Harry Truman party for a while. I don't think they're ever going to go back to where they should be when they were successful, but I don't know to what degree this manifestation is like the McGovern phenomenon, or it seems to me far more radical. And I don't know anybody in that party because the big money is with the AOCs and that fringe wing. It's odd, counterintuitive, but they really are with the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Soros wing. And I don't see any impediment to it, is what I'm trying to say. They'd have to be really defeated again and again and again uh, for them to be irrelevant. And they have so many resources. That's why Donald Trump is very smart this time around. He's not dealing with the symptoms of the Progressive Project U. He's looking at what caused it when they have no political power in the Congress, Supreme Court, or executive. They're on the wrong side of issues 3070, and yet they still exercise power. And he concluded it was the universities, it's the media, it's the corporate boardroom, the foundation, and he's addressing the root causes. And I think that's why they're so hysterical. No one in their right
And I,
mind ever thought they would defund PBS or NPR or go after Harvard.
that's on my list, all of those. So let's go down my. This is Hugh Hewitt's list, not Donald Trump's
Okay.
list of the most significant things. Number one, I think the most significant thing was to shatter the Iranian nuclear program and destroy the threat of a theocracy with an end times eschatology obtaining weapons of mass destruction. Right behind it, restoring Israel to the status of the equal of any of our allies. How do you rate that action? It was really only 36 hours, but boy, what a 36 hours to change the Middle East.
It changed the Middle East, and even as fundamental, I think, was it didn't lead to a tit for tat, endless forever war. No sooner had he done that than he was called for a ceasefire. I think any other Republican president would have responded to that ceremonial performance art demonstration where they sent 7 or 8 missiles into Qatar, and Trump just said, "Well, they got to get it out of their system. They got to get it out of their system. It's a ceasefire. It didn't mean anything." So he was able to really destroy that nuclear infrastructure for maybe 5 to 10 years, if not longer. I think it might be longer given the assassinations that Israel did on their top elite. But he had an end to it. So now they have no air force, they have no navy, they have no air defenses, they have no nuclear program, and they're not at war. And I don't think anybody could have pulled that off like he did.
I agree. So that's a big win. Now, he also
Yes.
got NATO to commit to going to 5%. That's not a win, that's a pledge, but it's a vision for Europe defending itself against Russia. How significant is that?
I think you made the right distinction. It's very significant that people now interpret Trump as a positive catalyst for the needed change to the 2%. He did that almost single handedly. Whether they get to the 5%, I think Gerald Baker had a piece today, is he's very right about that because when you have about a 1.45 demographic and you have 16% of your population is Islamic, as Germany and France is getting close to, Britain's got the same problem, and then you have this twice the expense for electric usage or electricity kilowatt by hour than ours. I don't know how you get you free up the capital without deregulating and lowering taxes and closing your borders and going back to fossil fuel energy. And they don't seem to be, it hasn't gotten bad enough, I guess, but I'm really worried that they're ossified, calcified.
They may embrace small modular reactors, and if they do, they can make up their energy grid.
Yeah.
But they're caught in a regulatory morass of their own making, and I don't know that they can get themselves out. But Putin scares them, so they might. You've already mentioned. I want to dwell a little bit on the border closing. Not only is it done, and not only was it done in half of the 6 months, I mean completely done, 100%, from millions and millions of people to zero. I think that's the equivalent of the bloody flag that the Republicans are going to wave in presidential elections for a generation. Do you want to go back to the Biden border? Because that was such a catastrophe for the country. How significant politically? Now, we know what the consequences are for immigration. It's over. But how consequential is the political downstream effects of having done that?
Well, if he had done what a lot of people expected, cut down the 10,000 to 2,000 or 3,000, I think it would have been debatable. But he ended it, and he put to a lie the idea you needed comprehensive immigration. So from now on, if a Democrat comes in and we go back to the old system, people are going to say this is what it really is. This is a demographic effort to reconstitute, the political system of the United States by importing voters, and that's what it was. But Trump really exposed them by just I had never seen anything like it. He didn't just deal with a problem. He ended illegal entry in 6 months. Now he's got a problem with the 10 to 12 million that were let in under Biden. But I've never seen anybody. It's analogous, and maybe this is on your list as well. We were told by Pentagon. I've talked to a lot of generals. We were told we would not get 45 to 55,000 necessary recruits because of fill in the blanks: obesity, gangs, drugs, competition with private enterprise. Just impossible. And he comes in, and he solves that problem too against conventional wisdom. So, and I don't think anybody, anytime we have a military shortfall in the future, I think people are going to say you're going back to DEI, or you're giving that message to these white males who die at twice their numbers in Iraq and Afghanistan of the demographic, and you've alienated them. And DEI, and we all knew that was the reason that that particular cohort was not joining, and the data support that, but you couldn't get that message out. He just blew that up and said, change the message, change the value system, welcome people in that like to go to combat, and the problem's solved. And it's quite remarkable what he did with recruitment and the border.
It's not on my list, except I'll come to defense one removed from here, but you're absolutely right, and I'm going to expand my list for that. I want to get to the one big beautiful bill. He extended and expanded the tax cuts, and for the first time, I'm 69, Victor, first time, the key rates were made permanent. It was he refused to succumb to the Congressional Budget Office, and use the 10-year deal, which always created a crisis. They're permanent. If anyone changes them, they're raising taxes, political death knell. How significant? But in that bill, by the way, there's so many things I didn't even know that were in there, like $1,700 tax credits if you're a taxpayer in a state with school choice. I'm still absorbing everything that's in that bill. It was a massive piece of legislation that, unlike the Biden and Obama big bills, did a lot more than merely spend money. He I think, supercharged the economy. We won't know for 6 months, but I think that's what he did.
Yeah, and I had the same feeling. I've looked at it. I had no idea that taxing remittances to Mexico or taxing endowments was in it as well under the
Yep.
reconciliation. And it's everything is in there. I think we're in a period that we know there are no, as quote Rumsfeld, known unknowns. We've never seen promises. Doug Burgum said the other day it might be $15 trillion. The total market capitalization of Silicon Valley today is $9 trillion. We've never seen that much promised foreign investment. I know that everybody has contextualized the May debits to assets, revenues to expenses, but that was the first time since 2017 we had more coming in than going out. They say that's not unusual for May, but it was surely for the last 8 years. And I don't know the effect of unleashing the energy of the United States, or casting off the subsidies of the new Green Deal, or welcoming in this level of foreign investment, or we don't know at what point the Japanese, the Germans, the the Chinese were making enough money that a 10 to 12 or 15% tariff, they felt they could deal with it without raising prices and pricing them out of the market. But apparently there's some level there that they can afford a moderate tariff. And I think he's trying to find out what that level is. So, and then I haven't even talked about robotics and AI. So there are forces in play right now that could really radically change the way we look at the economy in a positive.
They will show up. They will show up first in defense. And part of the One Big Beautiful Bill is $158 billion of one-time spending. A lot of it committed to general areas like shipbuilding and AI and new submersibles and new drone. But that's a lot of money to throw at defense and tell them to innovate. I think that could yield quite a lot of defense for the United States. And I mean next generation defense, maybe moving away from carriers, moving to a fully automated Navy and submersible Navy over the course of 50 years. What say you about the defense rebuild underway?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nail. You hit the nail on the head. It depends on where the money is directed. Given what we've learned from the Middle East and Ukraine, it doesn't make sense to buy a $40 million Predator. I mean, they're very valuable to have them, but I think they get the message from Anduril and these other companies that they can swarm the zone and we can do it better than anybody else. It's kind of like going back to World War II, where we made very good weapons, but we made more of them than anybody. And we didn't just concentrate on a few platforms that were superior. So if we get into the idea the United States is producing drones like Russia and as cheaply and better than they are, and I'm talking about airborne, land robotics, and submarine drones, and even surface drones, I think that's the right way to go. And we already have that, as you pointed out. We have the carriers, we have the F-22s and F-35s for 10 or 15 more years, but we need something. We need more quantity than we have, and I think that's where this defense spending is going to.
Now, he's also engaged in a regulatory rollback. Not a lot of people know he's passed a dozen congressional review acts, which repealed the last gasp of the Biden administration, including the absurd California all vehicles will be electric mandate. And people like Burgum, who you mentioned earlier, they're just getting started. Doug Burgum is a very smart guy and very aggressively deregulating. Do you think that and those regulations that were rolled back were across environmental overreach, energy suppression, financial regulatory complexity? He's just blowing all that out. What will the impact be on America of that?
Well, I think it'll be pretty radical when he talks about 2 years to get a permit, and he's trying to get it within 3 to 4 weeks. And more importantly, he keeps mentioning these astronomical numbers of assets. He keeps saying use assets, assets. We have $100 trillion. I think what he's saying is that a state like California's got some of the richest timber, richest minerals, rare earths down in the Mojave Desert, Monterey shale deposits. And a lot of this is on federal land. And so what he's looking at the whole energy thing in a different aspect, I think. He thinks, there are assets here that can be developed not only for self sufficiency, but will grow the economy and grow federal revenues. And we've never really had somebody talk about the United States is very rich in the things it just won't touch, but it can develop these without harming the environment. I think that's what he's going to do, and I think it's going to make a big difference.
Do you? This is a sidebar. It's not on my list. You're a farmer, as well as being an academic and a class assistant, a commentator. Do you think anyone will ever turn around California's gridlock so that they do something big again, like a canal, like the peripheral canal that was 50 years ago and didn't work, or desalination plants? We're building this stupid train to nowhere. I think Trump's going to kill it dead. But will California ever do anything big again?
Well, on our latest census, the largest minority, the minority was Hispanics, 45%. And they polled in the last election. It was pretty much, even in California, because of the Central Valley Inland Empire, about 55% for Trump. Their issues are 40 cents kilowatt hour, $6 a gallon gasoline, the regulations you talk about, not enough water for the agriculture. So they are becoming very, very conservative. And if they find the right leadership, they don't go down the tribal route, but I think they feel that they're a force for sanity, I could see some big changes. But I have no confidence in that 10 million people from La Jolla to Berkeley, that coastal corridor that are, buttresses by, I said, the 9 trillion in Silicon Valley, the Bay Area politicians that run the state now. And they exercise so much control through their money and power, and that's where all of our elite, Caltech, Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA, they're all on the coast. So is the banking industry. So is Silicon Valley, and you have to have some foil to that. And when you lose 300,000 upper middle class professionals and small business people a year, and that's what we think is leaving, you're really it's really something has to change. I don't think those people will change. They're too wealthy and affluent, and they feel that they're immune from the consequences of their own deleterious ideology. But here, where I live in the San Joaquin Valley, there's a lot of second and third generation Mexican American politicians that are talking about just what you're talking about. Why don't we have more reservoirs? Why did we make high speed rail when we could have spent a tenth of that with a second Amtrak lane? Why is the 99, the I-5, the 101, 4 lanes, 2 in each direction, 70 years after they were built and improved? So they're a group that's talking about, they're not talking about transgender, they're not talking about DEI, they're not talking about reparations, none of that. They're just talking about how can we live, and they're a powerful group if they can get organized.
Part of that is inflation is calmed. Now, when inflation is, we've gone through two big inflation periods in my lifetime, the Carter inflation and the Biden inflation. How long does memory of how destructive inflation is lasts? And does that benefit Republicans after Trump?
Yeah, the problem with the second inflation is I don't think it ever ended. It spiked at 9.1, but it hit
Right.
things like food, gasoline, electricity, insurance. So here in California, one quarter of the people cannot pay their PG&E bill. PG&E is broke, the biggest
Pacific Gas
electricity.
and Electric, for people who don't live
Yes,
out there. They're the
yes.
largest
It,
provider, along with Southern California Edison, of electricity on the West Coast.
yeah, 25% can't pay their bill. When I see people in the southwest Fresno County, I go to a cut rate gas station. No one fills up with a credit card. They go in with $20, $50. They come back, they look at their wallet, they think I can spend another $20. And the gas here in this cheapest of all places in California is $5.50 a gallon.
Oh, my.
So yeah, so
Wow. I was
so
in New
people are
Hampshire yesterday. It was $2.89 I had to fill up. 289, Victor.
yeah, I filled up in Sharon Heights in Palo Alto a week ago, and it was 5.90. So um, I think what I'm getting at is that a lot of people think that that inflation and the regulatory climate in California never went down. And where I live, I have a little place up in the foothills. I was talking to one of the people. He thought as many as 30% of the people that have cabins above 1,500 feet do not have any fire insurance whatsoever because they've been priced out of the market or they can't get it. And the California Fair Plan is basically bankrupt. It's not very good. So we're seeing new things I don't think we've ever seen before, where we're reaching a peak where insurance doesn't work. A lot of people can't afford car insurance. Uh, they can't afford to turn on the air conditioner. If I go to the local Walmart today, I will see people in there sitting there to get the free cooling because they don't want to turn on their apartment or something. And so I don't think we realize that about Newsom and that type of governance, that really ruined the middle class. It was aimed at the middle class, and Biden's was too, and it was a double whammy here. But it's almost unlivable for if you don't make over 70, 80, 90,000 per capita. It's just impossible to live.
Now, I want to turn to something you've mentioned already. The Trump war on DEI and CRT has driven DEI underground, has crushed CRT completely. Title IX has been protected, and elite higher education has been served notice that it has to comply with the Constitution and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, these are demands that Trump is making. He's suing Harvard right now. Wall Street Journal yesterday, even if Harvard wins this court case, the Trump fight won't go away. There's a long editorial, I believe it's in the New York Times. Elite colleges have found a new virtue for applicants to fake. They're now making you do Zoom calls so that people can get a fix on your race, ethnicity, and whether or not you are compliant with the overclass's point of view. I think this is a war on ordinary, a war on normal, that Trump has crushed the proponents of abnormal, but he hadn't won yet. What's it going to take to win?
It's going to take more transparency. I think that's his point, to target Harvard, the lead university, and show the public what they're doing. And when Stanford lets in 9% of its incoming class as white males the last 3 years after George Floyd, that really alienated a lot of people. And they didn't know why they were doing it. But they've got so much culpability that the public doesn't know. These theme houses are not theme houses. They're 99% La Raza theme houses, or 99% African American. They say these are alternate graduation ceremony, but they're 99% one particular race. If anybody did that with Europe, we want a European American graduation ceremony or theme, they would not allow it. There's rampant institutionalized anti-Semitism. They're bringing in 300,000 students to pay 110% tuition, room, and board. 70% of them are from China or illiberal regimes in the Middle East. Everybody knew at Stanford, it was a joke that you don't need to charge HHS or the Department of Energy 55% overhead. And so they're going down to 15. So when you look at what Trump is trying to do and what he's trying to expose, it's revolutionary, because there have been people who said, I've talked to some economists, if Stanford has, just to take one example, if they have to go down to 15% on their massive federal grants, and if they have to pay an 8% tax on endowment, they may have to come up with $300 or $400 million per year. And the other big revelation that I think Trump has kind of exposed is these endowments view are not really 55 billion at Harvard, 35 billion at Stanford. Most of that money is targeted to esoteric or mainstream projects that can't be put into the general fund. And more importantly, these are long-term assets. And when they have to have fire sales to free up liquidity, you'll find that these endowments are not what they are. And people will tell you that off the record, and they're going to have to go out and borrow money to make this endowment tax or the surcharge reduction. And that's not even the fines they're looking at for having foreign nationals they didn't report. I think Stanford was fined $50 million the first term for not reporting Chinese gifts. So they've got a lot of exposure. Yeah.
There's also an attempt to target the admission of foreign students, not because they are foreign students, but because they occupy places. I saw Mark Andreessen give a talk recently that if you're a white kid in Wisconsin and your parents want you to go to an elite college, forget it. You're not getting in. And that's going to anger, again, it's more fuel for the populist revolt, but it's not really a populist revolt. It's a demand that meritocracy return. Do you think Trump he's got Harmeet Dillon over at the Office of Civil Rights, got Linda McMahon, he's got a bunch of good judges on the Supreme Court that hate counting by race and counting by gender. Do you think it can get done? Is it possible?
Yeah, I think he can, because they know what they're doing. If you talk to people, faculty members or administrators in higher education, they don't say we're not doing that. They're saying that we're doing that, but you have no right to say we can't do it, or we're doing that and we're doing it now in such a way you'll never figure out what we're doing. But they never deny what they're doing. So they never deny that what they're doing is in conflict, say, with the 2023 Supreme Court ruling, or as you said, the civil rights legislation 64 and 65. So it's just a matter of telling the public what they're doing, and the public, when they find out what they're doing, all the polls show. I think the latest poll said only 16% had great confidence in the Ivy League anymore. So they're losing this war, and the smart people will cut a deal before it's too late.
You mentioned California, and I go back and forth between the 49 in California. That 45% minority of Hispanic, they want their kids to go to college. They want them to get into the UC system. They want them to get into the state system. But those systems are broken, and I don't know that they want those kids. Do they?
You got a very good point, because I taught in the California State University system for 21 years. And when I left Cal State Fresno, it was about 75% Hispanic, but the faculty did not reflect the values of the students. Their target, or their mission, the faculty thought, was to indoctrinate these students kind of in a Marxist idea of false consciousness. You are a minority. Remember that. That's your primary identification. You have been exploited. It wasn't, you're going to be the future leaders. Let's give you the skills, analytical, compositional, scientific, technological, to remain preeminent. And I think the parents were very skeptical of that. And so there is I'll put it this way, every Mexican-American person I encountered in 2024 that discussed the election, maybe 200 in my community, which is about 85% Hispanic, every male was for Trump, and every male under the age of, I'd say, 25 was for Harris or Biden. And they all had gone to college.
We'll come back to that. I want to get on to a big win, even though it's a small amount of money. NPR and PBS was defended, as well as USAID. USAID was an early win, but I've been going after NPR and PBS since I worked for them, since 1992. I've said this is broken. And Reagan tried to defund it. It's never been done before. Trump got it done. How significant is that symbolic win, Victor?
That's very significant. It basically is saying we're not going to have a European BBC like state megaphone on the left. And that's what it was. When I think it was Mr. Berliner or Ira Berliner, the dissident
Uri,
at
yeah.
NPR.
Yeah.
Yeah, Uri, yeah. He said 80, 87 people in the newsroom, and they were every single one was a registered Democrat. They knew it. It's like the universities, they know what they're doing, and they think it's cute, and that the people are stupid, and they can find all sorts of gymnastics to get away with it, but they don't deny what they're doing. They know deep down that what they're doing is wrong, and they're kind of paranoid. They're deer in the headlights. The problem they have with Donald Trump is not that he's a billionaire or they think he's crass or crude. Their problem with him is they don't think he cares. He doesn't care what they say about him. He does not. All the levers they operated with the Bushes or Romney or McCain or a typical Bob Dole, that doesn't work with Donald Trump. He's a pariah. He's an outsider. He looks at their disdain almost as either it's irrelevant or he thinks it's expected. And they can't quite fathom that. So they don't really know how to deal with him.
He's indifferent to insult, which I think is actually a superpower. I think it's a superpower not to care when people call you a fascist when you're not a fascist. I just think he's indifferent to it. I see a lot of it in Churchill. Churchill was indifferent for 10 years to the insults thrown his way during his wilderness years.
Yes.
And having that steel skin is important. I want to get to the U.S. Steel deal for Pennsylvania and the AI energy investment in Western Pennsylvania. You mentioned the trillions in Silicon Valley. Well, the trillions are being spread around now, Victor. There's going to be $50 billion in Western PA. AstraZeneca yesterday announced that they're going to bring $50 billion to Virginia and a couple other states to make their drugs here because Trump scares them with the trade deal. Do you think the investment in America, not in California, is going to set off revolutions in all those states that are good for the states and good for the polity?
Yeah, I do. I really do think when you're talking about a magnitude of 10 to 15 trillion, and if it's honored by these foreign entities within a year or two, there's various ratios. Like sometimes talk to the economist at Hoover of how many jobs are created by the type of investment and the size of the investment. But I think they agree that there's going to be several million jobs created by this, lots of jobs. And at the very time when people were worried that AI and robotics were going to displace American workers, and you get the impression that the Trump people think that they can create as many jobs as they're going to lose to automation, and yet the result will be higher productivity all around. And so I think, I've been talking to a lot of people. Sometimes they dispatch fellows to raise money for the Hoover Institution, but I was shocked, about the corporate people that they innately were skeptical or didn't like Donald Trump, and now they say something different. They say, well, we don't like his tweets, but my God, this is like our wildest dreams come true. If we wanted to reform the United States, this is the way to do it. And they're a little worried about the debt, of course, but they cannot believe that he's doing these things, and it makes them kind of awkward because they support everything he's doing, but they don't like the manner in which he's doing it, and that causes them problems.
We'll come back to that dissonance after these last three things. Abroad, I've already mentioned Iran and Israel, but he de-escalated the India-Pakistan combat. It was hot, and it could have gone out of control. There was a terror attack at the beginning. He helped, or Marco Rubio at his direction helped, the Democratic Republic of Congo settle matters with M23, which was the Rwandan-backed guerrilla. And he's brought home close to 50 Americans from captivity, including the American held hostage in Hamas land. What do you make of the Trump foreign policy? What do you discern it to be?
Well, you outline this humanitarian aspect, and I noticed that in domestic and political when he was running for office, all three times, he was the first major politician when he went to the Middle West or the Rust Belt. He would always use the possessive personal pronoun our farmers, our workers. I'd never heard that before. And when he discussed in his wilderness years Ukraine, he always, the first thing he said, this is just a waste of life. Maybe it was because he's a builder and he thinks that destruction is, but there was a humanitarian thing to it. This is just a crazy thing. And when they said, Iran did this ceremonial missile attack, and they did it both with after Soleimani and after we took out, he didn't react. He said, why do I want to kill a lot of people? And that really flummoxed the left, because he does have this sense that he's really interested in not killing people, and not killing people by killing people, and not killing people by being lax enough that bad people try to kill people. In other words, trying to get deterrence so we don't lose people. And he's interested in hostages, and he has a desire to be, as you said, a peacemaker. And I think that really confuses the left. I was talking to a professor, and he said, I was just about ready to scream at Trump about the Iran incursion, and then all of a sudden it was over. And he said, make Iran great again and ceasefire. That really, I think that's one of the reasons the left is so bizarre now. All these antics and ceremonial holding a baseball bat or smutty video. They can't figure him out. He doesn't fit the right-wing bogeyman the way they would like.
Well, he's not a fascist. This is what it comes down to. If you've staked your entire party on the claim that he's a fascist, and he's manifestly not a fascist, and he's only got 3.5 years left, what is his significance? I mean, you'll have to answer this again in 3.5 years. We'll do this maybe every quarter, every half year, sit down and assess. But what is his significance? The first term was so off the rails by Russia, 2 impeachments, January 6th. Then he puts up with lawfare for 4 years, show trial in New York, derailed show trial in Atlanta, an out-of-control Javert and Jack Smith. And he's persecuted, actually persecuted in a way that an American president has never been. What's it done? And now he's come in with this 6 months. What's it done to American politics in your view? What are your first inklings of what it's done?
Well, it made Donald Trump a much better candidate, and he got a lot more empathy. I think if he had won the 2020 election, it wouldn't have been as successful as this one, because we did see in full view what the progressive project can be like under the disasters of Biden. So all of those criteria helped Donald Trump. But I guess what has happened, the left's not even aware of it, they destroyed all the protocols that we had lived by for generations. We don't go raid a ex-president's home. We do not try to get a ex-president or any major candidate. We don't try to deballot him in 25 states. We don't try to get local and state and federal prosecutors coordinated in the way that Biden did. When you look at Fannie Willis's boyfriend in the White House, at the same time Jack Smith is appointed as the special prosecutor the same day that Coangelo leaves the DOJ to go work for Alvin Bragg. So we don't do that. And now they've done all that. And they've sort of said there are no more rules anymore. So that all of their, and then we don't do what John Brennan and Comey did. We don't try to destroy a candidate in an election with a false narrative of collusion, or we don't round up 51 people to lie using their authority as an ex-intelligence official, and we don't lie on the verge of the last debate to affect an election, and just an obvious lie that this genuine laptop is cooked up in Russia. So they've done things that we've never really seen before, and I think there's no precedence anymore. It's kind of dangerous, but Donald Trump, for all of their fascists, he has not done what they are doing. And I think the big issue that we're all looking at, he says, my success will be my revenge. But if you don't hold those people account, and there's no consequences for really trying to overthrow the process of elections and maybe even the presidency, then there's no deterrence that people won't try it again, especially if you've lied repeatedly to Congress or under oath. So I just think that what they did to Donald Trump and the fact that he got stronger and he survived all of these, even the assassination, it's I've never seen anything like that in American history. It's the attempt to destroy a president personally, psychologically, financially, every A to Z, and yet he survived and came out on the other end stronger.
So here's where I want to exit, Victor. At the same time, a very small thing happened with significance. The Colbert Show was canceled. Colbert, Fallon, and Kimmel totaled 6 million people total. Greg Gutfeld had 3 million people a night, but that's down from Carson having 50 million, right? So that what legacy media is done. The Washington Post fired its editor of the opinion, or David quit the editor of the opinion pages because Bezos said he wanted to believe in free markets and free minds, which is sort of a classic Wall Street Journal thing, and he's trying to bring it. I don't know if it's going to survive. I think everything is shattered and in ruins. You've got a podcast that's extremely possible, Victor Davis Hanson. We've got the Ruthless podcast. We've got the Commentary podcast. We've got Mary Catherine Ham and Vic Mattis doing Getting Hammered. We've got 1,000 different ways to consume media. Now, there's some bad things out there that are full of half truths. I'm sure you saw something about Hunter Biden's meltdown on some podcast I'd never heard of. But what I'm saying is, we're in a new world. People can find out the truth, and I don't mean, oh, I read it on the internet, I did my own research. I mean, they find mediators, editors. John Ellis does news items. You do your podcast, the Ruthless guy. Do you think the entire country is going to be different profoundly because legacy media is shattered?
I do. I go on Fox News 3 times a week for about 11 years. I write 2 syndicated columns. I've written 26 books. Nobody bothered me, when I was in an airport. I was anonymous. And then I do this podcast, and it kind of explodes, and people come up to you at the airport, and they don't say, I like you on Fox, I like your book, they don't even mention it. They say, your podcast. And you're absolutely right that the right somehow found a genre that the left should have dominated, but it doesn't because they're not explicit and candid, and people know that. Donald Trump also, he scans the horizons and he looks for things that are over with, but we don't, it's kind of like the emperor's new clothes. He said, this person is naked, or this industry is naked. So he looks at late night television, and when he comments, he's like, this guy's getting what, $20 million a year, and he's losing 40 million, and he's got a fraction of the traditional audience of yesteryear. And so Donald Trump, he didn't fire him or anything, but he comments in a way that says he's a loser, he's over with. And he does that, and he's absolutely right on his public commentary. So he sort of passes judgment on NPR, PBS, late night talk shows, and he doesn't. He just tries to remind people that these people are NSNBC, NBC, CNN. I guess what I'm saying is the worst thing that a leftist media person can hear is that he's a loser or that he has no audience, and that's what Donald Trump is reminding the world. And in the place of these people, the vacuum is enormous, and what's happened, people are filling it in every aspect. And podcaster in America, I mean, you either go on and people listen to you or you don't. So they come in, they leave, they depart. It's a very meritocratic, competitive business. And late night talk shows are not competitive. It's a monopoly. It's a legacy, ossified idea.
Do you know what I see happen? It's an observation and then a last question. My observation is smart is winning. If you bring value to people, they're very desperate to hear informed commentary. They might not agree with it all the time. They might agree with some of it. But if you bring informed, if you've got history on your side and your ability, that's why I started. I began with Marius and Sulla, and we're ending here with Colbert. That's quite an arc for a podcast, quite an arc for a radio show. I'm doing it for this reason. The times we are and the times they are changing, as Dylan would say. How significant a change are we living in right now, Victor Davis Hanson?
Well, I think it's the most significant, and I'm 71. It's the most significant in my life. There's all these unknowns. We've never seen anything like it. And the Reagan Revolution broached these subjects, but was not able to enact it. And this guy is able to do it. And the left is getting weaker every day in its criticism of it, and there's no goalpost, there's no known protocol, there's no orthodoxies, and in that vacuum of the collapse of the left, conservatives and traditionalisms are occupying that space. And let's hope that they're responsible. I'll just say a final thing. You're absolutely right about history. We have advertisers on our podcast, and the portions that get the most popularity are when we talk about World War II or farming in connection with modern life. People really want to know data. They want to know about things they don't know. They don't want you to go on there and just scream about you like this candidate or you don't. And I think you're absolutely right to bring in history. It really taps a human need to get some transparent transcendence and reference points. And I've just noticed in our podcast when we just talk about politics for 10 or 20 minutes versus trying to connect politics to history or culture or a lost way of life on the farm, any of these things I didn't think would poll very well, but apparently the advertisers think they do.
Oh, I think that you are succeeding because people want to know someone. You've become one of the editors for the country. And by that, I mean people turn to you with an expectation that they will not be lied to. And so if Republicans have failed, you will tell them that Republicans have failed. Democrats have failed, you will tell them. And you'll be shocked that fourth graders can't read and eighth graders can't add. And you will tell them, and they will listen to you. And I think it's a great, it could be a golden age. And I'm hopeful that Trump's rhetoric is about a golden age is actually coming true. Victor Davis Hanson been very patient with me. I want everyone to sign up for, like, and subscribe to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Jack Fowler has his own winsome element to it. Make sure you write down victorhanson.com for everything that Victor does. I will hope to see you soon down the road, Victor, and thank you for spending this much time with me today.
Thank you. I've always enjoyed being on your show.